So let's see exactly how to lay out custom labels. Make it try and be as simple as possible for you. The first thing I would recommend is to click on your list of specimens from the left menu, which is going to bring you to this page, and then click the Create Labels button, and it's going to open up and give you the default super boring, um, no frills label. So you'll notice that when you do that, it clicks and creates a new tab. I'm just going to click back to our original tab. So let's look at how we make our labels look a little bit more exciting. So if we look here, the gear icon in the top right corner, if we click that and then click custom labels, it's going to take us to the page where we can design our custom labels. These drag and drop fields we'll get to after we decide how we want our labels to be laid out. So before you begin this process, you should have an idea of what you want your labels to look like, how many rows you're going to have on it, how many columns each one of those rows are going to have. And each column or each row could have multiple different columns, number of columns per row. So if we take a look, a couple of the things we're going to want to look at here is the card dimensions. So if you have an idea of what you want your card to look like, and perhaps have a background image in mind that you want to dress up your labels with something that is a little more complex than just adding some text and some columns. What we can do, for my labels, I created this background image. And my concept that I had for my labels is I'm actually going to have three rows. The top row is going to be an identification number that I'm going to float to the right hand side or right aligned. The second is going to be the title for my label or for the label. So that would, if we go back to the to our specimen here, we'll just click in. This is a dummy specimen that we have here, but for our sake, we see this title for label, so that's the title field. And then the other one that I want to use is the locality name. So this field right here, you'll see I'm also going to put the identifier, which would be this field right here. So let's jump back to our custom label. So the background image that I have, I'll just click on it one more time before we get into it. The idea is I'm going to have all three rows inside this gray box that I have on my label. So when I upload that image, so we'll go ahead, we can see here, I have it labeled like that, and you'll see it drops it in and shows us exactly what our label is going to look like. The dimensions of the card are a lot larger. If we look at it, we see it's probably 3 times larger than we see it here on this page. With print, you do want things to be a higher resolution. It's going to end up with a better quality of a print. So I drop that in, and then I know the dimensions of my card. So for those who paid attention in math class, you'll need to figure out your height and width scaled down to the size of the card you want. If you remember the old cross multiply and divide, but mine I happen to know are 165 by 265. So you see that made it slightly larger than it was before. The borders, you're able to set a width. This is any number you want. So maybe we want a thicker outer border, maybe something in a blue range so we can see our label has the blue around it. And then maybe we want a thinner inner border. So I will, we can do whatever color we like. I do not want that for my cards. I did put the the border I did want on my label or my background image itself. But I'm going to delete these out, set both to 0, which will get rid of them. If you recall, I said I wanted to do 3 rows. So we wanted to do the specimen, the identifier in the top right, and then the title will be centered, and then the locality name will be centered right under that. So I have it set to 3 rows, and you'll see it added 3 rows down below. The way each of these fields work, they're comma separated. So if I wanted to do 2 columns in my first, so you'll see it defaults to a 50-50. And of course, just for your sake, these dotted lines do not show up when you print. They're there just to help you see exactly where everything lines up. So what we can do, we can set a column height. So let's say we want that top row to be 20 pixels high, which I think is what it defaults to, so I don't think that really matters. The column width, the font size, alignment, text decoration, and font, these are all what are they, 5 columns, are comma separated. So for the column width, it will need to add up to 100, but I could do 25, comma 75, and you'll see now 25% of the width is here, the other 75% is in the second column. And that works for each of these columns. So if you mouse over the question mark icons that we see here, it should give you a tip. I will fix that for the live site. I believe it is working on the live site. This is a development site. But you'll see a little pop-up that'll appear that tells you the valid fields that are in these. So for example, if you recall, I wanted to do my identifier is going to be aligned right. So by putting an R for right, which this pop-up would tell us, that would be in that field. I also want my font size to be 11, and that's going to be up to you to play with a little bit. And I will show you where that's important here in a minute, as to how you play with it. If you remember, I did have us open our labels in a new tab, which it does by default, so that we can update and see our changes in real time. So I want that back to 1 column. And then for my next row, I want it to be 1 column. My height, I want it at 35. I just want a little bit more spacing. For the font size, we're going to go a little bit larger at 14. We want it aligned center, and we want it bold. So we're going to select a B for bold. I for italic, U for underline are also options here. I'm not going to play with the fonts. For number of columns on my last one, I want it to be 1. Column height is 35. We're going to do the same large size here. We want it center aligned, but we are not going to do bold for the locality. So now I can take and I can drag and drop my identifier to the first column. I can drop my title into the second column. You'll see it's picking up the slightly larger font and that it is bold. And then we can drop our locality into the last row that we have. And then we can hit submit. And in doing so, we'll see that our label has been saved. And we can also go back to that tab where we have our labels, and by refreshing the page by clicking F5 or clicking the little circle with the arrow on it in your browser bar, it will update. I'm going to do a separate tutorial on cutting, but we see these red lines that show up on here. Those are your cut lines that with printing you obviously don't want a little bit of black on, when you cut out your labels, so you don't want a little bit of the lines showing. So this way you're able to, if you use one of those paper cutters, you can slice it nicely right along those lines and create your labels. So where I was talking about why we want to have this open, if we wanted to play with it to see how it looks as we move. So one of the things you'll notice here, and this happened to me when I did my first labels. So this number, I really don't want it sitting right on that line. So there's ways that we can get it off of that line. The easiest way is going to be in our profile or the label profile to actually make this two separate columns in that first row and make one column 99% and then the right column only at 1%, which is just going to move this over a little bit. So if you pay attention to the tips and the please read, you will know that by changing anything down here, it will delete the fields that we have saved up here, which I am prepared for and I'm quite all right with. So we're going to change that to 2. I'm going to do the 99 and the 1, which we'll barely see up here. And apparently I did make the update so that it does not clear it. But we'll go ahead and save. And we click back to our label tab and refresh. We now see that our label is just off that line a little bit. So when we print it, it's not going to be sitting right on the line. It's going to look a little bit nicer. And that's for all these fields. You know, you can play with them, kind of make changes as you see fit. One thing, these will go to multiple lines. So even though I have these set at 35 as the line height, they will get larger. Think of the line height that you put in here as a minimum height, and then it will grow if you have multiple lines of information. Obviously, at some point, it's going to make your cards look pretty silly. So those two fields that we referenced here for the title and locality name, you can put as many characters as you want in, but you may want to think about your labels and how that's going to look. So that should wrap up. The only thing I didn't mention, field labels. So you could type, there we go. There's the tooltips that I was talking about. So we can see, it kind of gives some valid options. It gives tips on comma separating and that kind of stuff. So if you have any questions after going through this, feel free to reach out. The field labels, sorry, I distract myself sometimes. You could put in, like if I wanted in this column, I wanted it to say ID : like that. When I save it and update the labels, it would put an ID : and then the identifier. So if you want your fields to have labels, I personally do not, so I won't have that in for mine. But if you do, if you want it to say locality name, locality, whatever you want it to be, that's, you can make it say whatever you like. Also, if there's another field you would like to see added other than what's available, let me know and I will consider it. Otherwise, enjoy creating and producing your own labels, and as always, don't hesitate to reach out, and I thank you for giving Geology 365 a try.